Well, welcome back. We're doing a review of the budget that was announced yesterday. Joining me in studio is Ferdy Schneider. He's National Head of Tax and Tax Partner at BDO. And then on the line is George Herman, and he's from Citadel. I say welcome to both of you. George, let's start with you, and then Ferdy, I'll come back to you. Give us, in a nutshell, what was your opinion of the budget? What did you think? George?
Well, Mr. Mboweni is a well-liked and respected character by the private sector, and so very eloquently he delivered what we knew was going to be a very tough budget. And so overall, everybody gave him a high score, but I think that score was for Mr. Mboweni. Unfortunately, the reality under that of the numbers is a lot more startling. He papered over the cracks very, very smoothly. But unfortunately, the fiscal metrics has deteriorated, and the fiscal impetus to growth from government spending has even worsened. So unfortunately, I think the picture below the surface is very negative.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, George. Ferdy, let's bring you in here. Your opinion about the budget.
Kubi, I think the minister actually did what he could with what he had to do. I think effectively he did the best that he could. I think it's fantastic that he did not really change corporate income tax or the VAT rates. He extended the zero rate a bit. The fact that they prioritise now and articulates the prioritisation of the main concerns of the average South African, I think is fantastic. He would say it's a populist budget. I don't think it is. I think it's a realistic budget. I think that is exactly what most of the ministers of finance would have done in these shoes.
George, let's go back to you. And Ferdy, I'm going to come and touch a little bit just a little bit more around the fact that he didn't raise any tax. But George, one can really slice it anyway, but we are running a 4.5% deficit for 2019-2020, and that then reduces, if one can call it a reduction, to 4.3% for 2020-2021. I mean, it feels almost like government is trying to fill, it's almost like a leaking can, and they're trying to fill the little holes everywhere that they possibly can. But once they fill a little hole, there's another one that potentially, springs a leak. What's the end game here? What does this ultimately look like, George?
That's the exact problem, because every year the prognostication of where debt to GDP goes, that ratio is set to improve 3 years down the line. And when we get to that point in time, as you say, then there's a new leak, and then it gets higher and higher, and hence we go through that 60% ceiling, which is the typical no-go line in the sand for the typical rating agencies. I agree with Freddie that this was not a populist budget, which you have to agree the minister had to play towards to try and avoid a ratings downgrade. I think he might have succeeded in that, and maybe our outlook gets changed from neutral to negative, but we don't get outright downgraded to the next notch. So I think they have succeeded. In answering your question, what's the end game? That is very difficult to see, because this Eskom problem of 69 billion over 3 years, that does not solve the problem, and unfortunately does not fill that hole entirely. So this will come back to haunt us even further.
George, the other problem that one obviously faces in a case like this is that, you can appoint a chief restructuring officer for something like Eskom, but you're not going to solve this problem in 6 months' time. Heck, I don't even think you'll solve this problem in 12 months' time. You're probably going to take a couple of years to solve a problem like this.
Absolutely correct, because it is just another effort to try and deflect the responsibility away from political sensitive characters, so maybe that either the president or the minister does not get tarnished by the tough decisions that needs to be taken on the ground. But we know for a fact that the unions will not accept anything that anybody with any title tells them what is prudent for Eskom right now. So unfortunately, it's going to be a toothless dog.
Ferdy, I mean, you made the point just now that they didn't raise any tax. I suppose this is one of the fears, is, how else do we fund something like this? Surely this has to go in conjunction with the raising of taxes. I mean, one could have had a tax revolt if they continue to raise taxes. There was already talk about potentially something like that occurring.
Kubi, believe that tax revolt is very academic. I think it's not really very practical, considering SARS's systems at the moment. Guys that would tax revolt would actually be required to stand together as employees, employers, VAT payers, VAT collectors, everything. So I think that's almost impossible. I think what we see here, and just linking onto your previous question as well, is that we know now that we cannot turn this economy around from inside. I think we're there. We are on our knees as a South African economy. We need to attract foreign direct investment. We're not going to do it ourselves. There's too many structural problems, like high unemployment, low growth. I mean, they estimate 1.5, but I think that's a pipe dream. If you see that we actually came in at 0.7, so we need to attract foreign direct investment, and very fast as well.
Well, fortunately, this is all we have time for this evening regarding the budget speech and some of the opinions. Ferdy Schneider, he's the National Head of Tax and Tax Partner at BDO, and then on the line is George Herman. He is the Director and CIO at Citadel.